Coming up in today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to preview the 2023 secondary. Last year, the secondary was incredible for the first time. Feels like in a long time in Philadelphia. Can they run it back at corner and safety this year with a different-looking unit? All that and more on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Thursday edition of the show. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers for making us your first listen Monday through Friday. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. Just a few days away, crazy enough, until Philadelphia Eagles training camp. Next Tuesday, players report to the NovaCare complex. Gino, the Eagles also have one big reveal they need to hurry up and get to. It's the Kelly Green jerseys. I've seen Seattle crushing it with their alternates, or their throwbacks. Minnesota's doing theirs. The Creamsicles are back in Tampa Bay. Don't know what the hell the Colts revealed today, that disgusting blue and black jersey, but everybody's getting in on the action, and the Eagles are now trolling us on Twitter with little leaks, like they did a Throwback Thursday today, but it was of the stupid Frankfurt Yellow Jackets jerseys from 2007. I know they're totally messing with us right now because everybody else is revealing it. I need them to get this thing going.
And I think a big reason for that, Lou, is one, that you put so much stock into these jersey analytics, but two, especially the position we're going to talk about, there's a lot to say about how
also
much
to bury
swagger,
the lead, we're talking corner and safety today.
Yeah,
yes, thank you.
The swagger in the Kelly Greens for Slay.
Oh, they're going to look so good.
Man, when they come out there with the white arm sleeves on, it's going to look sick, Lou.
Oh, man.
I'm very
It's got to be
excited.
white. I agree. The accessories are going to have to be white.
They have to be white. I think it would be sweet to get the Kelly Green, just the clean throwback wing on the side, and then go with the old school jerseys. Keep it clean, keep it simple. And man, those guys are going to look good out there. And I remember that first game when you were anticipating it, looking at the Eagles jerseys of Kevin Kolb and Michael Vick that you could buy when they did it the last time.
Yeah.
But Lou, I have a take on this, and I think we've talked about this in the past. One, they need to allow as many jerseys as possible. And two, I think they take the soccer approach where they change it every year, but you can still wear whatever jersey that you want.
No, that's a good point. Every year, the soccer jerseys are different, right? Like, Manchester City,
season.
Liverpool, there's some little tweak. I'm with you on that for sure. So, yeah, Philadelphia, let's get in on that. Let's get the Kelly Greens unveiled. I'm sure now that they're leaking that kind of stuff on social media or trolling us more so, maybe tomorrow, I'm sure within the next few days, Kelly Green's going to be out. Gino, also, before we get into corner, just want to get into the news that broke yesterday. Funny enough, we're talking about the offensive line. We're talking about who are going to be the backups, who's your swing tackle, what's the role of Tyler Steen and Cam Jurgens, Jack Driscoll. The Eagles, there was a reunion yesterday. They brought back Dennis Kelly, who we all remember was part of the Dorial Green-Beckham trade back in 2016. Dennis Kelly, 54 starts, most of them in Tennessee after he was traded for DGB. He's back now in Philadelphia, and I really like that move. I mean, this is a veteran, versatile player that can pretty much play whatever spot you ask him on the line. That's huge because it also allows Tyler Steen and Cam Jurgens really to focus up more on, guard and center this year. And, Steen's going to, of course, still cross-train a tackle, but they can really focus more at right guard this year with Kelly being one of those primary backup tackles. And that makes me feel a lot better because, again, Jack Driscoll, I just don't think was going to cut it if Steen's got to play guard or, whatever the situation was. So I think that was a really good move from Howie. It's not the sexy reunion of like a Deshaun Jackson, but I think it was an effective one.
I took 3 takeaways from that. One, Howie always rights his wrongs. Look at the Rashad Penny move with Donnell Pumphrey as well. There's another one that you could look at, and he's done that at
He definitely doesn't let
well.
things go, man. I mean, I thought the DGB trade, to this day, I would have took that risk every single time. But, yeah, I mean, he definitely never lets things go when there's a bad move.
Number 2, I take away that this team is going to continue to add players in this offseason, much like Howie Roseman has done, and that's just the status quo at this point. And number 3, tell me that the Camilleri jinx isn't real, that we recorded that show on offensive line yesterday, no sooner than 5 minutes after we were done recording, Dennis Kelly gets added to the equation. And I think it's a great move, Lou, because now you are going at least 8 deep on the offensive line, and I think the discussion of keeping 10 is really in the cards.
You brought that up
now.
yesterday. Now that you bring in Kelee, yeah, absolutely. Maybe now Brett Tultho is on the outside looking in because he was that veteran, tackle depth that I was thinking of. And Tyler Steen, if he doesn't win the right guard job, probably still your primary backup tackle. But who knows, if they really want him to be the right guard of the future and they have him focus up there, Dennis Kelee is another option they have at tackle, which is just good because you didn't really have any experience when it comes to backup tackles. I like Tyler Steen, but the kid's going to be a rookie. And then Jack Driscoll had a start last year against New Orleans that really did not go well. So Dennis Kelee, again, 54 starts at tackle, and he's played guard as well in Philly and Tennessee. So that was a really good move, and it doesn't cost the Eagles a whole lot. So, yeah, that was definitely a nice move. But, let's dive into today's main topic as we continue our positional previews with training camp just around the corner. We're heading over to the defensive backfield. We were doing offense all week and last Friday. Now we head over to defense, and this is a unit that finally last year, it felt surreal as an Eagles fan to see how good they were, not only at corner, but at safety at the same time, with Darius Slay, James Bradberry, Avonte Maddox, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Epps has a career year. Because normally, Gino, the secondary, you've won in spite of it. Even in the Super Bowl, you didn't win because of it. And even when one position in the backfield was a strength, let's say it was corner, safety was a weakness, right? i.e. 2021. And then a lot of the years when safety was a strength, Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod, you had to deal with Jalen Mills in front of them or, Ronald Darby. So last year, finally, they had both units working at the same time. What's your confidence level this year that they can run it back and have that same success?
I'm not confident that they can be that good.
I agree. Probably because of safety, right?
Of course, because of safety. And it's such an important position, especially how the Eagles like to use them. And even more so now with Sean Desai. And there was an interesting discussion on Twitter over the last couple of days of Kelee Ringo potentially playing that star position, which is more of a safety / overhang position.
I'm intrigued by that. I like that.
What is the way that they're going to go, especially because if they want to play more safeties, well, you have less depth than you had last year, right? And now you're going to ask maybe a rookie Sidney Brown to step in right away. Terrell Edmunds is definitely going to play a boatload of snaps for you. Yeah. And Reed Blankenship, power to him, man. I think he's going to be coming in here as truly that one guy that, hey, if Nakobe Dean goes down, let's say, who could be another quarterback on defense? And I think that's what Reed Blankenship made the roster because of last year, was how smart this kid is. And there was a reason why they trusted him down the stretch in the Super Bowl. So the confidence level of repeating last year, I wouldn't say is high. But I still think they could be a top 10 unit in the league, Lou, because you're going to have the guys on the outside that can cover, and you're just going to ask these safeties to not lose games for you. You just have to do enough. Yeah, and not to mention the pass rush you have in front of them is always going to make things easier for a secondary. I agree with you. I think you have the perfect take on that. They're probably not going to be elite at safety like they were last year. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was elite, right? Leads the league in interceptions at that position. Marcus Epps had a career year. He got a nice contract with the Las Vegas Raiders this offseason. You lose both starters. I don't think they're going to replace that with, I'm very high on Sidney Brown. I don't think right away this year he's going to be CDJ. I think Terrell Edmunds is a very solid player. I think his floor is high, but I think his ceiling is low. And I think Reed Blankenship can end up probably being a pretty similar player in that way too. I think he projects to be like a Terrell Edmunds level starter in the league. So that's good. It's definitely not going to lose you games, but yeah, I don't think like last year you're going to win more with safety than win because of, as opposed to last year, a lot of time you're winning because of it. But that's fine. I mean, I think that's okay. And as you mentioned with the corners and the pass rush you have, you should be good between those three. And then, like you mentioned, if maybe you try out Kelee Ringo there, you have Justin Evans, who you brought over from the New Orleans Saints. You should get enough this year to be okay. And I think that's been the reality the Eagles normally have had in a post-Malcolm Jenkins world. So I will say, though, I think this is the one position of all of them maybe in the starting lineup where you have the biggest question of if there's a real difference maker there. Even at linebacker, safety's deeper than linebacker, Gino, but Nakobe Dean can be a star. At safety, there's, I think this year at least, the biggest question of, is there one guy that makes a huge impact? And somebody has to step up to the plate because the opportunity is going to be there, right? And philosophically, we have understood that Howie Roseman is going to invest more on the outside positions when it comes to the secondary. He wants to take away those strengths, and he will go light at safety. And sometimes that's come back to bite him. The Jaquan Jarrett years, the Nate Allen years, the early years of Howie Roseman. Some years he's made great moves in Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod, pairing those two guys together. And then last year, what he did, I thought was really a great bargain hunting opportunity because Marcus Epps was the TJ Edwards equivalent where you just kept him around and he just continued to make plays for you. And Chauncey, you only got for a couple of day 3 draft picks. So now, you invested a 3rd-round pick in Sidney Brown. Can he be that guy right away? I don't know. His athleticism will more than likely will get him on the field. Terrell Edmunds' tackling ability will keep him on the field, and same with Reed Blankenship. But beyond them, you got to hope that these 3 guys can stay healthy. Right. This is truly one position you cannot afford to lose one of those 3 guys.
Gino, I think this is like the lowest guarantee this year is at safety that you have like a legitimate high-end starter. Agreed. And again, can Sidney Brown be that guy? I think we're both optimistic, but yeah, I think there's the least amount of guarantees here because he's a rookie 3rd-round pick. So, the good thing is though, Gino, last year we were very high on that 2022 roster, even before you traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. It was kind of the same reality. It was safety is definitely the biggest question mark, but I don't think it's going to be something that makes or breaks this team because they're so damn talented everywhere else. I feel pretty much the same way again right now, and I feel better about the group they have right now than what they had before they traded for CGJ last August.
Yeah, that's a fair take. It's
right? Because you didn't have an Edmunds or even a Sidney Brown level player at safety last year at this time of the year.
No, outside of Marcus Epps, you did not. And you always have to remember the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade and what I said earlier regarding they're always making moves. Man, let's say that all of a sudden the Cardinals are like, all right, we're just going to cut bait. This team really is not going to win any games. And Budda Baker all of a sudden is available late in the offseason, right? And maybe one of these guys that you didn't think was going to be available, maybe there's somebody that's an undrafted player, a young rookie that's going to beat them out in camp. That's where Howie Roseman loves to make his money, is in this time of year where teams might feel a little more panicked to make those moves. And especially now, Lou, where the cut down isn't 90 to 85 to 75 or whatever it used to be. It's 90 to 53. So teams are going to try and unload assets for a bargain price, especially if they know that they're going to have to cut him the next day, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that before we move over to corner is don't be surprised if this isn't how the safety group looks in a month or two or before week 1 starts. It was CGJ last year. It could be Budda Baker. Who knows who it could be before that? Howie Roseman always working the phone. So I think safety and probably linebacker, the 2 positions to watch the most when it comes to adding a higher level impact player starter for the 2023 season. Gino, I do want to get over to corner though, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Can Darius Slay and James Bradberry run back their 2022 success in 2023? All that and more on another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by our partners at eBay Motors, who have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Lyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're preparing for your fantasy draft, I've got mine in 2 weeks. I cannot wait. Or you're scouting the waiver wire every week. We're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And Gino, today the focus is the snake draft. So let's say you won your championship. You had success in 2022. You're picking, let's say it's a 12-team league. You're picking at 12 and it's a snake draft. You're picking at 12 and then you go back-to-back. You round the corner, first overall in the second round. What are your options with those back-to-back picks? Yeah, you're not getting a Christian McCaffrey level player, maybe not even a Bijan Robinson, who's going a lot higher in some of these drafts that I've seen, but you do have some pretty good options that you can double down with. And I think the 2 guys you should keep an eye on, one of them's a Philadelphia Eagle, and I'm sorry, but the other one is a Dallas Cowboy. I think if you're going to try the zero RB strategy, which a lot of people now are in PPR leagues, why not try CeeDee Lamb, the combo? It's going to be CeeDee Brown. CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown around the bend. Go hard on wide receiver. You got volume with both of them. Explosive plays. Both guys make their money in so many different areas of the field. Gino, I feel like CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown, investing in the NFC East at receiver right now, I think is a pretty solid investment.
It's tough to root for CD, but if you want to talk about an unbelievable football
he's a guy who wanted to be an Eagle, though. So
who plays very similar to the guy that you mentioned on the other side, A.J. Brown. If you like PPR leagues and you don't like running backs, you go heavy on guys that can make catches in traffic. A.J. Brown and CD are going to dominate in that department, Lou. you could say that both of those guys are at least good for 80 catches this year. And how many touchdowns are those going to add as well?
Right. And they're running for the King Monsters as well. They eat everywhere, the red zone, down the field, you name it. Vinny Lyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up. Because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors, let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, Eagles fans, we're continuing on this Thursday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles. Shout out to our everydayers. We're back Monday through Friday as training camp gets going next Tuesday, which is insane, but I'm so glad football is back. Gino, we're talking about the defensive backfield today for the Birds, which you made a good point a few weeks ago on the show. Not that we're predicting it. This is the most peaceful I've been about the Eagles secondary in quite some time. And we've said that about a lot of positions. We've said that about quarterback and wide receiver, but it's true for the secondary especially. But you did mention if there was a position that would regress a little bit this year, it probably is the DBs because you lose both starting safeties. And we mentioned a lot of the guys that we have now in the starting lineup we like, but we don't love them. And then at corner, Darius Slay and James Bradberry, they're getting up there in age. I'm not predicting a regression, but man, it's going to be tough to replicate what they did last year. James Bradberry was an all-pro, and Darius Slay wasn't far behind. I mean, those two were the best cornerback duo in the league.
Well, when you're extending players in the National Football League, there's always that old adage that you pay them not for what they did, but what you can believe that they can do. And I trust Howie Roseman sees at least 3 more years of good play out of each of these guys.
There shouldn't be a dramatic drop-off, Gino, from either. I don't think this year.
And you have to add Avonte Maddox into that equation as well, Lou.
You just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, if he's on the field, you have the best trio of corners in the National Football League. There's no question about it. You arguably have a top outside duo in James Bradberry and Darius Slay. Looking at this division, I think it's going to match up well against the guys that you are going to have to defend. The things that are going to be intriguing to me are a guy like Brandon Cooks, though. Add him to Dallas. How are they going to deal with that speed? That'll be very intriguing. But if you look around the rest of the teams, look at the Giants, you look at Isaiah Hodgins, a bigger-bodied wide receiver who was the leading target getter for them last year for a little bit, and now they bring in Darren Waller, a bigger body. They don't have CGJ to deal with him. Can a safety deal with him? Well, hey, we still have these 2 outside corners that we could just play matchups with, and that's what they're going to have to approach this as, is that we are going to put our best 2 guys on your 2 best receivers.
And a lot of teams have 2+ guys that you have to cover now. So having these 3, massive. And that's why you got to keep Maddox healthy too, because there's teams that have 3 great receivers. Look in your own division, Washington, they've got Curtis Samuel, Jayon Dotson, and Terry McLaurin. And then with Dallas, you mentioned Cooks, we mentioned CeeDee Lamb. If Michael Gallup stays healthy, that's another trio you got to deal with twice a year.
And you have to have not just 3, but you have to have 4, 5, 6.
Oh, yeah. Look at some of the teams they're playing, man, this year. Miami.
Yes.
I mean, you got to play Kansas City, San Francisco, Seattle, New York. There's a lot of teams with weapons.
And not just 1, but 3, 4. Teams that have – look at Seattle right now. You have those big 3, and let's say they get anything out of the tight end position, then you have to worry about that as well. And something that I am looking at the corner position is if they do go with that star role, who are going to be those positions? Players that play that position will probably be Kelee Ringo. Would you say Josiah Scott could fill in there? Maybe.
I prefer Ringo.
Of that, it's either slot corner or outside corner. None of these guys are going to be players that you can move inside or out, in my opinion, because beyond the big 3, you have guys like Josh Jobe, Eli Ricks, Mario Goodrich, Zech McPherson. All those guys are either an inside corner or an outside corner. They're not
Yeah.
going to be that safety type of interchange type of player. But how many of those guys do you keep if you do keep that star type of player? That's where it's going to get intriguing.
Yeah, Gino, this is, I think we've said it before, but I think this is the best young group of defensive backs they've had in quite some time. So even though you have some questions at safety and you wonder how Slay and Bradberry are going to age and if Maddox can stay healthy, there's definitely some questions in these positions. I mean, you look at the depth, Greedy Williams, Zech McPherson, Josh Jobe.
Greedy, right?
Yeah, Eli Ricks, I'm really excited about this year. Of course, Kelee Ringo, who, was a 4th-round pick he traded up for. I thought he was a day one, end of day one, early day two talent that fell to the 4th round for, one reason or another. I think this is a really good group, and you could probably bank on at least a few of those guys panning out, even if they're not like top-tier starters. I think a couple of this is the first time in a long time I feel that way. The depth of the secondary for years I've been concerned with. Like if Slay got hurt last year or the year before, outside of Zech, it's like, who are your boundary corners?
And right now, Zech is interchanging at the Avonte Maddox role as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they have some big plans for him if Avonte can stay healthy, right? That would be...
It's going to be a great competition, man, this summer at that spot.
Looking at corner, Lou, it is going to get fast food, your favorite fast food item. And even when it's bad, you're still like, okay, yeah, that was kind of good, right? Like it made me full. Like I'm okay now at this point. That's what corner is going to be. Even if you go down to these guys on the depth chart, it's not the year of 2018 or 2019 where you're looking at these guys like Josh Hawkins. Who the hell is this kid? No,
these guys have talent, man. Like
a promising Eli Ricks, a
Right.
promising Josh Jobe, guys that other teams coveted. You look at the undrafted money that they allocated to these players. Other teams were trying to sign those guys, and to have body profiles like that also project well at special teams positions, they might just go heavy there because they don't have guys at linebacker that can play special teams, for example, right? Like if you keep 3 backers, Sean Bradley's your 3rd guy and he's a key special teamer, maybe you go heavy at cornerback or interchange at safety, right?
You think they keep 7? Like it's probably 6 at least. I mean, because you got Slay, Bradberry, Maddox. Those are your top 3. I think Zech makes this roster for sure. Greedy. So those are your top 5. Ringo is a lock. That's 6. And let's say Josh Jobe or Eli Ricks takes another step this offseason. And again, like you mentioned the star position, some versatility. If you think a couple of these guys can play both in and out, some guys can play safety, you might want to keep a couple extra, especially if at safety, you're not loving what you're seeing in K'Von Wallace, Justin Evans. Maybe you do go heavier in corner if all these young guys pan out. It's going to be, I feel like, Gino, in a way, the safeties and corners almost have to compete against each other and convince this team to keep an extra 1 or 2.
Yeah, just list it as a defensive back competition. That's what I'm doing. May the best, 11, 12 defensive backs on this team make the roster.
Right. 12, I'd say 12 or 13.
I'm not just going to keep K'Von Wallace over a young Eli Ricks if Eli looks better simply because we don't have bodies at safety.
Because, if you lose 4 safeties, I'll move Ringo to safety over putting Wallace there. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, and maybe they like the idea of trying Avonte there for a little bit because they've done that before. And
it's a good point.
I'm not just going to keep safeties just to keep safeties. I'm not just going to keep linebackers just to keep linebackers. I'm keeping the guys that are going to, fit what you want to do on defense. You can't have linebackers that just don't fit the play speed of the rest of the guys around them, right?
Which is kind of what this roster looks like right now.
It does. And defensive back, if you have guys that are running 4-4 and they look it on the field as well, and you could find a body profile that you like to change over to defensive back to cross-train them, which the Eagles love to do, you do that every day of the week, especially because a guy like K'Von Wallace has nobody outside of Howie Roseman connected to him on this team right now.
Yeah.
The defensive coordinator didn't pick him. The offensive coordinator and the coach didn't pick him.
And it sucks. We liked him a lot. And, I thought he looked better last year in the summer, but he just has probably not done enough right now to warrant a roster spot over these other young kids.
I don't think so either. And you really are going to have to step up on special teams, as we mentioned, with wide receiver. And that's going to be a good problem to have, because if you have all of these young guys that have to make the roster that way, Lou, 1, it should make your special teams unit better. 2, it'll expose Mike Clay if you really can't get the best out of these kids. And 3, I think the Eagles, especially if you look at their defensive line, are at the forefront of not really putting a label on a position group and just keeping the best guys that are going to fit in what they want to do.
That's true.
That's what you have to do at DB.
I think, Gino, with Sean Desai this year on defense, you're going to see more of a positionless unit. I think you're going to see more DBs used than Jonathan Gannon used. I mean, he used 2 linebackers exclusively. I think there's going to be a lot of situations this year where the only linebacker out there is Nakobe Dean, right?
Hopefully so. Hopefully so, because is Morrow going to be a coverage linebacker on 3rd and long? Or are you going to want to put Kelee Ringo out there? Even if Kelee gets beat on a couple, he's a better athlete. He's a better cover player.
Right, or you throw Sidney Brown out there with Blankenship and Edmunds. Yeah, I think you're going to see Desai do that a lot.
Yeah, and you look at what Seattle has done over the last couple of years, and it's just a very free-flowing defense that puts those guys in the best position to succeed. And out of all the position groups that Desai had his hands on last year, Lou, that Seattle secondary, there was just something special about this team that really didn't have these top-level players. Yeah, Quandre Diggs was great at one time. He's not who he was before, and Tariq Woolen's a rookie, and Kobe Bryant, you're getting the best out of him, and all of those guys played up to the standard, and if not better. Yeah. And now you look at this Eagles secondary. They have talent. Yeah, that's the word. Focus on the talent with this group.
You have to develop. It's developmental talent, and I think I like that you made the Seattle point because, is Kelee Ringo, is he Tariq Woolen? I'm not sure, but it's a player like that where it's a day 3 pick like Woolen was, like Kobe Bryant was coming out of Cincinnati that, Desai and that Seahawks team took and molded him. And I think there's, again, that's the one thing about this Eagles secondary. There's not a lot of guarantees behind your big 3. And I would even say Edmunds, right? So your 4 main starters of Maddox, Slay, Bradberry, and Edmunds, even Blankenship and Sidney Brown, there's question marks. But there's, between those guys and every corner we mentioned, there's a lot of opportunities to develop that talent. I just can't imagine a scenario where none of them pan out. I think there's going to be a couple guys at least that you're like, okay, we got something here.
I'm looking at this position group, especially safety, Lou, a lot like I did in that 2017 season. And I've mentioned this quote a lot that I said to the 4th and John guys, that Howie did enough on paper to get that cornerback position to where it should be. Yeah. Where the players developed and used in the right position. We now know that they weren't. Look at Rasul Douglas, for example.
Yeah.
You have to hope, and I've seen it from Sean Desai, in Seattle, what they did in Chicago under that Vic Fangio defense. I keep looking at that player, Bryce Callahan. You remember him, Lou, in Chicago? He was like that nickel corner that always just played well in this particular type of scheme. Maybe they drafted those guys that fit exactly what Sean Desai wants to do, brought in the proper candidates to do what he wants to do. And, we have 2 top-level corners on the outside, a top 5 nickel corner. You guys just have to be those players that don't cost us games.
And an elite pass rush that had over 70 sacks last year. That's the one thing we always have to mention. Is it makes life so much easier when you have those guys up front. But, I think the secondary, you got to give them credit. They last year helped with the pass rush a lot, too. It works hand in hand, right? The secondary buys time for the pass rush. The pass rush buys time for the secondary. And so I think there's more question marks back here than up front, which we'll get into tomorrow. But I'm still feeling pretty damn good about what the secondary looks like. Pro Football Focus too. They rank the Eagles the number 1 secondary in the NFC heading into the 2023 season. So still looking pretty good on paper and based on resume. We will get into, though, tomorrow, Gino, we'll get into the front 7, linebackers, defensive line right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast as we continue our positional previews with training camp kicking off next Tuesday. We got you covered right here in your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase, signing off another edition of Locked On Eagles. As always, thank you for downloading, thank you for watching and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.